guys, and welcome back to the channel. It's TheSketchMonkey here, back at Urban Motors to have a look at a sort of a sweet spot in the Audi TT's entire generation timeline. This is a 2012 Audi TTS. TTS meaning that we do have a little bit more power, 265 horsepower. We also have some added bits and pieces onto this beautiful bodywork. And have you noticed the color yet? This is called Solar Orange. They only made 16 TTSs in this specific color. I can't wait to dive into this design and the idea how this second generation TT came to be. We're gonna start with the front end, go over to the side, the rear, and then the interior before we're gonna take this for a drive. Let's have a look at some of the basic spec and tech of this 2012 Audi TTS. You have a 2-liter turbo inline 4, putting out 265 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque, connected to a 6-speed automatic transmission. It comes as quattro all-wheel drive. 0 to 60 takes 5.2 seconds with a top speed of 155 miles per hour. Fuel economy comes in at 23 city, 31 highway, and the price for this is $35,000. After the first generation Audi TT was introduced, Audi wanted to keep the classic elegant style of the TT, the first generation. But as you know, they got a lot of lawsuits with the first generation because of the lift in the rear end. So they had to add that wing into the rear end. And I'm going to show you exactly what they did here to make it still a very sleek design, but not having any of those safety issues that the first generation Audi TT had. And this is made out of completely aluminum. The entire body is all aluminum, meaning that we have a perfect 50-50 weight distribution here. And that of course helps with the drivability of this. The first generation was based on the Golf platform. This gets an entirely new platform. It's a lot better to drive than the first generation. So when Audi first came out with the first generation Audi TT, they did have some safety issues. We had the lift in the back end because it was too sleek of a design. That's why they had a lot of issues with high speed crashes, and they took it back and they added this little spoiler in the back. However, for this generation, they wanted to go back to that original sleek rear end, and that's exactly what they did in the rear. But they don't have any of the safety issues because we do have a spoiler hidden in the back. I'm going to show you that when we talk about the rear end. So talking about the front end design here, I think this is a beautiful transition from the first generation Audi TT into a more modernized look of the first generation. I think the first generation, if you just added a couple of key graphics, modernized the headlights, the intakes and so on, it would still be a very timeless design. And I think a lot of that transformed over to the second generation. With the simple lines of the headlights, you have these beautiful insides of the headlights here with the 2 bulbs. You still have a regular light bulb as the indicator light, but this being the facelift, the 2012 model, we do have the LED dots right here in the lower section. This generation came out in 2007, and the first version of this, the pre-facelift, did not have the LEDs at the bottom. Couple more details that will change for the TTS version, the more high performance variant of the TT. Then you have the TT RS. So what Audi wanted to do is take some inspiration, specifically these lines at the lower section. If you look at the Audi TT RS and compare it with this, they look very similar in the lower section, and that is because they wanted to morph them together closer visually. And I think they did a fantastic job by having this line curve downwards in this section. You also have the fog lights down here and this silver trim piece, which I am not so sure about in the TTS. I think I want to have this still be black. I think that would just make it look less busy in the front end. But overall, a fantastic design by Audi for the second generation of the TT. Now, some changes to the drivability of the second generation compared to the first generation is that this body is all aluminum, meaning that we do have a 50-50 weight distribution over both axles, meaning that this handles a lot better than the first generation, which was based on the Golf platform. This had a completely new platform, and it also made it drive more like a sports car. Let me know what you think about this solar orange color. Now that the sun is out, you can clearly see it. I like it. It looks very unique, but maybe not my personal style. I would like to have it be a little dialed down, but if you want a shouty color, I guess this is definitely the way to go. Now, coming around to the side view of the Audi TT, and this is clearly unmistakably a TT with this gorgeous roofline that goes in a continuous curve into the rear end. And you also have similar style to what we have in the first generation TT, with this shoulder line cutting being the end point off the taillights. But also, if we move all the way to the front end, you can see that this same line cuts the headlights in the exact same way that we have in the rear end, creating this almost symmetrical feel. But at the same time, this is a really dynamic design. That's the magic with the Audi TT. Even the first generation, if you cut it in the middle, the front end and the rear looks very similar to each other, but at the same time, Audi somehow managed to get some dynamic movement into a pretty symmetrical design. I'm a huge fan of the side views of TTs. I think that's the best view when it comes to the exterior design of the cars. We still have this big fender going around both the rear axle and the front wheel. As you can see, what makes the TTS different from a regular TT, if you look down here, you can see that this side skirt sticks out further. It's even so far out that the sun is hitting it right now. And I think this tiny detail down at the bottom, with the side skirts being further extruded outwards, it just creates a nice planted look for this design. It's a small detail, but it totally makes this look a lot more sporty than the normal TT. And then you have this cut line going through the centerpiece of the design and coming back in the rear bumper, looking beautiful, carves out some more of that volume, because you can see you have the shaded piece right here, so it makes it look less tall. So what do we got in the wheel and tire setup? We have 255 wide tires all around, and these are 19-inch wheels. However, these are specific for the TTS. And I have to say, I am not a huge fan of these Audi designs. Audi at this time usually made very sweet looking wheel designs. I would honestly prefer to have the normal, the pre-facelift TTs 19-inch wheels on here, or even better, I would want to have the 5-spoke TTRS wheels on this design, because I'm not a huge fan of this 3-spoke design that we have in each of these 5-spoke. I think it looks too busy compared to the sleek and simple styling of the rest of the car. Another detail I love about the TTS is the silvered out side mirrors that we have here with the LED indicator in the side. I think this just looks so classy, and I think it looks great with the silver wheels. And you also have the silver fuel cap back here. So instead of having blacked out pieces on the car, Audi decided to go a different route and add some silver bits and pieces onto some of the key graphic features of the exterior of the TTS. So if the side view is my favorite view of the TTS, my second favorite is definitely going to have to be the 3/4 rear view. I love the design here, how the key graphic features is part of the overall surfacing of this design. And this going back to 2007, the original second generation design, we still don't have a proper bumper for the TT. We didn't even have a proper bumper in the first generation, and that generation was so far ahead of its time, so there's no way they're gonna put a proper bumper in here and ruin the beautiful flow that we have in the rear end design. You can see it says TTS right here, meaning that we do have a couple of features in the rear that makes this specific for the TTS. The easiest way to know if you're looking at a normal 2012 TT or a TTS is if we go all the way down to the very bottom. You can see this diffuser that is specific for the facelifted, and then they made some changes for the TTS version for 2012. And we also have quad exhaust, something that you didn't see on the normal TT. And I think these quad exhaust just suits this design so well, and it looks fantastic, specifically in chrome. I would not want to black these out. Since we have a bunch of different silver and chrome pieces all around the car, I want to still have these tailpipes be in chrome. And just look at the symmetry of the rear end of this thing. It's just a gorgeous design still today. When they designed the second generation, they had some problems. They wanted to keep the sleek look that we have here, but of course they didn't want to have the same accidents that they have with the first generation Audi TT. So what they did was they integrated an active spoiler back here. So when you're just driving around town, it's gonna have this beautiful sleek look with this nice curvature in the rear end of the TT. But when you hit around 75 miles per hour, this thing is gonna slowly pop up and add that necessary downforce to the rear end. Because when you have a sleek design like this, it's going to create some lift in the rear. So we need to have something to counter that. And I think they did a fantastic job, the Audi engineers, to implement this wing into this design. Even when it's closed, we still have a small, subtle, little ducktail right here with the curvature added to it, right above the brake lights. I just wanted to take a second to talk about the taillights of the Audi TTS from 2012, because if you look closely inside here, you have a bunch of different elements building up the taillight design of this car. I think this was also ahead of its time. When you look at this design, it looks almost 3D printed. You have squares going into another square and just builds up and giving this 3D effect to the taillight. I really love the design of this generation's Audi TT, and specifically the taillight and the LEDs that we have in the headlights as well. Welcome to the beautiful interior of the 2012 Audi TTS. And to me, this is one of these interiors, like the 2012 era feels like we reached, at least in my opinion, we reached as much technology as I would necessarily want in a car. This is the perfect layout. We do still have analog gauges. We do have a digital gauge infotainment screen here. This is part of the facelift, by the way. They got a much better integration of the software and the screen size in 2011. I think the facelift was introduced. And that's it. We still have physical knobs for everything we need. So let's start up top here with these vents that we have going on. And you can see that we have circular vents going across the entire dash. We have 3 in the middle. I would think the 2 would maybe be sufficient, but they decided to add 3 here because why not? And I love the integration of this. You also have some soft touch material. This entire dash is not hard plastic, it's actually soft touch. I like that. Moving further down, we have this Audi Navigation Plus. This is the best navigation system Audi had back in the day, 11 years ago. And I have to say, the screen resolution is pretty good, but this is definitely not something that you would want to use in today's world because it feels very old. Let's see if we can even get the navigation to pop up here. I'm not sure. So you need to enter your city and your street address, and then I guess it shows up on the map in this car. This is back in 2012, so this is not a touchscreen. You have to use this dial and these buttons to navigate everything that goes on in the infotainment screen. So it's pretty tricky and old school to use this, but I do kind of like the integration. Personally, I don't think I would need any bigger size than this. This looks like maybe a 7-inch display or something like that. It's not big at all. It doesn't take up too much space, and when you have a smaller screen like this, it's a lot easier to just integrate it beautifully in the rest of the interior. Further down, these controls, to me, with this red LED that shows where the control is pointing, I think these would still work today because I love the feel of it. It still feels high quality after 11 years with the silver outline of these dials, and you have this red LED for the climate control, of course, the temperature, and you also have the fan speed and where you want the air to come out from. Very, very simple to use this system. Extremely easy when you're driving to figure out what it is you want to change, and just changes without having to look down and take your eyes off the road. Further down, you do have the settings for the heated seats. So you have heated seats in 3 different levels for both the driver and the passenger. Absolutely fantastic. Then you have this very small storage bin or something right here, and it looks like, and I'm not sure what exactly you can fit in that little storage spot, but you also have a cigarette lighter here if you want to light something up in the car. Moving further back, now this is a thing, back in 2012, it was one of these eras specifically for the US market where car manufacturers were not too keen on bringing manual transmissions over to the States. And that was unfortunately the case with this 2012 Audi TTS. It only came with the automated 6-speed transmission here in the States, but in other markets this could obviously be had with the 6-speed manual, which is something that I would desperately want to have in this car. But unfortunately for the United States, we only got this automatic transmission, and putting it into reverse, you're not going to get a backup camera because in 2012 that was not mandatory to have on the car, so this one does not have it. Further down, you do have the sport button here, so you can put it in sport button. That's the 2 options you have, sport or normal. and that's it. And I like that. It makes things less complex in my life. You also have the traction control on and off, and you have the hazards, and you have this button for popping up the wing manually in the back. If you don't want to go up to 75, you just want to show off driving 25 through a school zone, you can pop this up manually. You also have a manual e-brake right here, and attached to this brake itself is the smallest armrest I think I have ever seen in any car. Even the Lamborghini Huracan had a bigger armrest than this little thing. It's very interesting because it is exactly where you're gonna have your arm resting on it, so it kind of works. This is all the real estate you need to make a proper armrest. Audi figured that out, that 99% of drivers are going to have their arm on exactly this position. It actually works. Then you have some cup holders here. They look pretty small to me, and a 12-volt cigarette outlet, and some more storage back here behind the rear seats. Now, looking at these seats, I do love that the solar orange from the exterior comes back into the seats of this interior. I like the design of this. It looks very fluid and organic, nothing too complex. You also have orange stitching going around it. The bolstering is pretty solid, and they are power adjustable as well. And in addition, to make it even more special, you have this orange color, first of all, connection to the outside, and then you have the TTS stamped into the backrest of the seat, looking very nice. Overall, this interior almost feels like I'm sitting in an Audi R8, and that has to do with this line of the window, which is very similar. It feels very tight in here, and I love this feeling of being hugged by the car. And you can sit as low as you want in this car and really get that planted feel when you're driving this around. Moving on to the steering wheel here, nothing too fancy about this wheel, because back in the day we didn't have 100 options for the gauge cluster. We only had a small little digital screen in the middle, which you can't really do much with. So the only buttons or scroll wheels that you have here is for the volume, and then you have the tuning scroll on the left side. I do like this design of the steering wheel. It's leather wrapped, you have the orange stitching on the inside, and you also have a flat bottom with the TTS logo on the third spoke down at the bottom to make it feel a little special. Now you do have pedals for this gearbox. So this is a 6-speed. I'm gonna see what this feels like to drive in the manual mode when we take this out for a drive in just a minute. It's gonna feel very interesting because this is an old school automatic transmission with the manual shifters. The pedals themselves are very tiny. They're almost just like one single small square behind each spoke, but they do have a very nice click to them. Moving on to the gauge cluster, there's really not a lot to say about this gauge cluster. It looks very classic and analog. Analog tachometer, temp gauge, the fuel gauge is also analog, and the speedometer, of course, also analog with this blue grayish background and the TTS logo behind it. And of course, in 2012, companies knew how to make gauge cluster, and this obviously has a nice housing to it. On the left side of the steering wheel, you do have all the controls for the light settings and an additional round vent, just like we have right here in the middle. Moving on to the doors, also a very simplistic, straight to the point door design of the interiors of the door. We still have this orange leather that we have in the seats coming back in parts of the door, adding some nice contrast to it. You also have the contrast stitching right where the armrest sits, and some silver pieces along the way with some big storage compartment in the lower section, looking very nice and functional. Moving up top, I'm happy to say that we don't have a sunroof in this car, because that to me would ruin the beautiful surfacing that is the roof of any Audi TT. Instead, we have some nice sculpting here of the ceiling inside of this Audi TT. I really like the design of this, and again, I'm glad they didn't put a sunroof in this specific car. Now, we do have some back seats back there, but I am definitely not gonna try and climb in there because they are way too small for me. I'm 6'1", and there is no way I'm gonna fit back there. But to me, this would just be added luggage space. You can just throw in whatever you want back there if it doesn't fit in the trunk. Last but not least, we do have a very nice size glove box in the 2012 Audi TTS. Alright guys, setting off in the 2012 Audi TTS. So what do we got under the hood of this beauty? We do have a turbocharged 2-liter inline 4-cylinder with 265 horsepower, 0 to 60 in about 5.2 seconds. So it is not a slow car, this Audi TTS. And 265 horsepower might not sound like a crazy amount these days, but you have to keep in mind, the newer the cars are today, the more technology and stuff is crammed into these designs. So this is a pretty light car. It's also made, as I said, all out of aluminum, which makes it a whole lot lighter than using steel or any other type of metal, like the first generation Audi TT, for example. And it feels lively. The suspension is definitely on the firmer side, which I prefer because I do have it also in the sport mode right now. The thing about this though, back in 2005, Audi introduced a concept that I'm so disappointed did not make it into production, because I think if they would have put that car into production, it would have been a legendary Audi, and that was the Audi shooting brake concept from 2005. That was sort of the preview to this car and what the second generation Audi TT was going to look like. And of course, the name says itself, Audi shooting brake. It was an Audi TT with a shooting brake design, and this is quick. This is fun to drive. It's a lot quicker than I expected it to be honest. 265 horsepower. I thought it was gonna be, fast, but not this happy to go fast. And it sounds good too. It revs high when you have it in the sport setting and in the transmission in sport as well. Even though it is only 6 gears in this, it still feels very quick and happy in the gear shifts. I think Audi TT is one of these designs that just have held up so well over time. This one looks like it could have been a brand new model. All I got to do is just add some new graphics to it. For example, make the indicator lights and so on LEDs, and the turning radius of this thing is extremely good. A lot shorter than I thought. Man, it is quick. All-wheel drive, putting all that power down to all 4 wheels, so you have traction when you're stepping on it. Oh yeah. So let's put it into manual and see how it shifts when we have it in manual with a 6-speed automatic from 2012. First gear, and let's go. Honestly, it's a lot better than I expected it to be. So how can we sum up this Audi TTS 2012? I'm honestly surprised by how cool and how much fun this is to drive. I thought it would be, I've always had this image of Audi TTs being pretty boring to drive. They look cool, but they just don't handle right. But this second generation feels a lot more sporty than the first generation, and I think that has to do with the brand new platform, the first generation being based on the Golf platform. This is a fantastic machine, and I think the TTS trim feels like a good balance between power and pricing. This is not a very expensive car, but it's still a very fun Audi. I really look forward to driving the new, the latest, the last generation. Unfortunately, Audi TTs are not going to be made anymore, unfortunately. 2023, or it might be 2024, is the last year for the Audi TT. I look forward to driving that because I want to feel how much more modern that feels compared to this. I can tell that this still has some of that analog driving experience in it, and I actually love that about this car. I hope that is not completely gone in the newer generation's TT. Overall, I am pleasantly surprised with the experience of this Audi TT. I really like this car, and it really drives like a proper sports car. Huge thanks to Urban Motors for providing this gorgeous Audi TT for me to review for you guys today. If you're interested in this specific example, make sure you go to urbanmotors.com and check it out. I'm going to link it down in the description. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.